So we are reading Power versus Force by Dr. David Hawkins. We are on chapter 7, page number 124 of the book, and page number
25 of the PDF.
49 showing.
No, the page number
it's
is
okay, Shivangla, carry on. Chalo.
Education. A profoundly telling exercise may be performed by evaluating the books in one's library. Simply hold them over the solar plexus and have somebody test your muscle strength. As you do this, your books will end up in two piles. Reflection on the differences between the two can produce a revelation. Many testers have found it one of the most valuable experiences of their lives. Some left the two piles there for a period of time to let the lesson sink in.
So have you all got what he's saying over here? Every book will also make you weak or strong. So you can actually test using this process which book is good for you and which book is not good for you, which book is depleting you and which book will be energizing you. So if you just keep the book on your solar plexus and do the muscle test, you will get it. You can do the ring test also and ask the question, at what level of consciousness is this book relating to me at? Right? If it is below 200, you put it on one pile. If it is above 200, you put it in the other pile. And you'll get to know that, okay, which books are good for you and which good books are not good for you.
It is equally informative to try the same procedure with one's music collection. The negative group will include violent, sexist rap music and heavy metal rap. The positive pile will contain classical music, classical rock, the Beatles included. Much country western, surprisingly, it calibrates generally at 520. The problems of the heart, reggae, popular ballads, etc.
So music like hard rock, acid rock, and all these things will always test negative. They constantly deplete you. Classical music, right? Country music, music which is gentle, generally will be uplifting. That is what has been generally seen. And today what people are doing, they're hearing this music, this acid rock and all, it really messes with the brain at the end of the day.
Bhaiya, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
When you talked about the book, see, an educational book would anyway be good, whatever it is. It could be a history, geography, science, or anything. Are we talking about only fiction and all that to find out if the book is good?
Any book. Now today, a person has written a history book, right? Okay. Now the history book may not contain the truth.
Okay. So
that
then, way we can.
If you have a geography book, it may not have correct details in it.
Okay, that way. Okay.
So then, how do you know it's working for you? Okay. A piece of fiction may be good for you because it gives you a lesson, it teaches you something. And it may be gruesome or something which is depleting you. So it may deplete you. Even a spiritual book, if it is talking about a doctrine which is not the truth, then again it will deplete you.
Okay, thank you.
So every book will calibrate at a certain level, right?
Yeah, I never thought of it. I just thought of it as an educational book should be good anyway.
No, so now abhi ek WhatsApp ghum raha tha where they are talking about the Bhagavad Gita, right? And they've written all sorts of nonsense in the Bhagavad Gita. So the book's name is Bhagavad Gita, but inside is all nonsense.
Okay.
So now at what level of consciousness do you think that's going to calibrate?
Okay. I've understood it. Thank you.
Right.
Thank
you.
Yes,
Bhaiya, there's somebody not able to connect to the awareness.
Then I have sent the right link again. By mistake, I sent the Gita Academy link. So I've just posted the new link on the group.
Okay. I'll just tell her.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hello.
Spirituality. Though this chapter has dealt primarily with secular uses of this tool, it should be pointed out that applications of the technique can be profoundly spiritual. We may, for instance, test the contrasting statements I am a body and I have a body. Appropriate questions proceeding from this point can resolve one's most basic fears. All limiting self-definitions create fear because they create vulnerability.
So again, very, very clearly over here, every statement will be operating at a level of consciousness. What is the amount of truth in a particular statement can be calibrated, right? Whether it is right or whether it is wrong, you can get a calibration. And anything that takes you into fear, that is, fear will be on the left side of the grid. It will be below, it will calibrate below 200, will not be good for you. It is very simple and straight. Anything that limits you, it puts you into a container, will always calibrate at a lower level of consciousness. Things which are expansive, things which are open-ended, things which are taking you into a higher state of consciousness, into growth, into learning, will always calibrate higher.
Our perceptions are essentially distorted by our own self-definition, which in turn is qualified by identifying our limitations.
So basically what he's saying over here is our belief systems. We are limited by our belief system. And the idea here today is to transcend our belief system. This is what Robert Monroe always says, that we need to transcend our belief system. If we need to grow, we need to step out of our comfort zone, and that will be getting out of our belief system. Okay. We create our limitations. We create our limits because of the belief system.
Our perceptions are essentially error occurs when we cling to the belief that I am that. Truth is unveiled when we see that one has that or does that instead of is that.
So, am I the body or I am using the body, right? Today, when you look at consciousness itself, you are using the body, you are not the body. Because even if the body, something happens to the body, you can still be active mentally, which is something that we see when we go into focus 10, mind awake, body asleep. Your body is asleep. You can hear yourself snoring, but your mind is still awake, right? So again, we create our limitations by creating definitions of ourselves, which is not actually what we are. So we need to transcend these definitions that we create about ourselves.
There is great freedom in the realization that I have a body and a mind, rather than I am my mind or body. Once the fear of death is transcended, experience because that particular fear underlies all others. Few people know what it is to live without fear, but the purpose of existence become transparent. Once this realization occurs, life becomes effortless and the sources of suffering dissolve. Suffering is only the price we pay for our attachments.
So again, there is a primal fear of death, right? Once you transcend the fear of death, a lot of freedom can come into your system. And this is something that most people who experience the 6-day Monroe programs actually see a reduction in the fear of death, simply because they have actually experienced that there is something beyond this physical body. You actually have conscious awareness even if the physical body is not there, right? And that gives you a lot of freedom. And we need to understand that there is a life beyond. Basically, that's it. The moment we get that, a lot of stuff automatically gets transcended. And of course, over here, a big freedom is to understand and actually acknowledge and accept that we are not our body, We are not our mind. We are actually much beyond that. This is exactly what the Vedantic principles are also talking about all the time, right? That we are not our body, we are not our mind, we are all beyond everything that we are actually perceiving. We are not this 3D reality. We exist in a much bigger state of conscious awareness.
Empirical issues, however, are involved even in spiritual quests. In the matter of spiritual teachers, Americans are extremely naive, partly because spiritual pursuit does not have a long tradition here as it does in older cultures. That the world abounds with false gurus is well known in India, but such cynicism does not come readily to Americans. Fakes repeatedly come out of India with impressive presentations and hoodwink naive Western spiritual aspirants who, in childlike trust, leave home and hearth, sell their belongings, and follow the charismatic spiritual con man down a path to eventual disillusionment. The acumen of some of these gurus can be dazzling, and their capacity to mimic a convincing sincerity is amazing. They often take you in even sophisticated spiritual seekers. This is spiritual seduction, a mixture of truth and falsehood blended in a slick package. The teachings sound valid if one cannot see that their truth has been distorted by a false context.
So we all know that there are many false gurus, right? We need to have a process by which we can discern whether someone is actually at what level of consciousness. And the idea here is to connect to people or to gurus or to situations which are operating at a higher level of consciousness than us, not at a lower level. So if a guru is operating falsely, using this process, you can actually figure out where the guru is operating from and whether you really need to associate with that person or not.
Such spiritual exploitation is by some government should they return home.
Shivangla, read it again, please. You broke up. Which network are you using?
I have the Geo line fiber.
I don't know why you're breaking up. Anyway, start again.
Such spiritual exploitation is routinely exposed in India, where these media-hungry frauds are held in low regard and the government should they return home. Such teachers can inflict terrible suffering and tragedy. The most catastrophic depressions in clinical practice occur in people who have discovered that they have been spiritually deceived. Such disillusionment and pain is far more severe than that which results from other losses in life, and recovery has not always been possible.
So, see, suppose you have a physical problem, right? Now, if your child is threatened by something else, then you'll forget your physical problem and the emotional problem will become more important. Now, you're having the mental issues will be more important than the emotional issues, right? And the spiritual issues are more important than the mental issues. Now, if you are spiritually duped, if you are spiritually taken into a wrong path by someone, and then you realize that you were going in a high spiritual zone, and suddenly the guru himself has turned out to be a fraud, it can be such a huge hit for someone that it can become very difficult to recover from that. That's why having a tool in place to be able to actually discern who to connect with and who not to connect with becomes very important. So that is where it is also said that the disciple actually tests the guru. The guru tests the disciple also needs to test the guru. So it's very, very important whenever we are connecting with anyone to know where or what state of consciousness that person is operating from. What state of consciousness that organization is operating from is very important to actually understand before making these connections.
The charm of all false prophets is persuasiveness, but use of the testing method herein described provides a foolproof safeguard against such deception. It is informative to watch TV evangelists with the sound turned off and have somebody test you. False gurus also make everyone go weak in a dramatic fashion. It is as though the universe considers spiritual rape a specially grave error.
So again, as soon as you think of a person, right, it will actually result in you becoming stronger or weaker. And you can actually test if a person is good for you or not good for you. And this is a very important way because see, today, many times, people come with a big facade and they are actually something else inside and something that they are showing. So if we can discern that, it becomes so powerful a tool. You can understand who do you associate with and who do you not associate with. And it becomes very, very important. And especially when you're looking at spirituality, it becomes extremely important, right? Because if you're taken on the wrong path, then coming back onto the right path is not such a easy task.
What of a true teacher? In the first place, a universal hallmark is that the true teacher never controls anyone's life in any way, instead, merely explaining how to advance consciousness. If we do
This is very important, right? A true teacher never wants to control anyone. So when a real teacher is there, the student has full freedom. And this is something that we saw in when we were reading autobiography of a yogi, where when Yogananji is in the ashram, the guru gives him freedom. He can come and go as he pleases, literally. Yeah, he disciplines him and he tells him. But if Yogananji doesn't listen, he forgets it. But yeah, you do what you want to do, right? Because a true guru will never want to control you. The true guru will always give you freedom. So any organization which tells you do not do anything else, right? Do not attempt to go and try something else. You have to, it should start ringing bells in your head that I am the best and there is nothing else above that. Always the ghanti should start ringing because there is always scope for growth. There's always scope for betterment. Yeah, if you see all the spiritual masters, all the spiritual teachers had multiple gurus, right? They did not have one guru. They learned from a lot of people because it's literally impossible for one person to know everything. So as soon as someone says that I know everything and don't go anywhere else, there's a big question mark. You have to start, your eyes should open.
If we do test, though, we will find, for instance, that Mother Teresa, recognized by the world through the Nobel Prize, calibrates at 300, as does the acknowledged Indian spiritual saint Ramana Maharishi, who died in 1956. He went into a state of enlightenment at age 16, never left the mountain where he lived and led a life of humble simplicity, eschewing money, prestige, and followers, and would have remained unknown had not a well-known American writer's description of Ramana's enlightened state brought seekers from all over the world. Nowhere is spiritual fraud more prevalent than the world of channelers and psychics. It is informative to check out the level of truth these mediums express, as well as the level of the source on the other side.
Now, this is interesting, right? So psychics and mediums, they're getting information and giving you information. What is the level of consciousness of the information coming in? And what is the level of the source? From where is that information coming? What is the level of consciousness of that source? So this will tell you a very good story, right? So there is something called a Karn Pisach. where it's called a Kant Pisach. We read about it in Autobiography for Yogi also, and it came in Gora, the Left Hand of God also, right? So this guy has this spirit who keeps telling him information, and that information may be right or wrong, right? So many times it is right, but many times it is wrong. So you can actually test the level of consciousness of this information coming through.
Sometimes a surprisingly high level of truth is in fact being taught. A level of truth which calibrates at 500 is worth listening to regardless of its origin, because the inability to love is at the root of most human problems. Beyond the level of 500, material possessions and worldly needs become irrelevant, which is why true teachers neither seek nor desire material gain.
So now this becomes important, right? After the level of 500, material possessions takes a backseat. Okay, so you're not hankering after material possession once you start operating on a regular basis above 500. So you will see that most real spiritual gurus, they live a very simple life. They're not hankering after shobhaji. They're not hankering after material comforts, right? So this becomes a very important part over here, that if you see any so-called guru hankering after spiritual comforts, then you understand that this person is operating at below 500. So be careful as to what you're listening and understanding from them.
You meant material comforts.
Yeah, material comforts.
Appropriate use of the system will always lead to self-discovery and compassion for everyone. When we see how we all must struggle with the downside of human nature. Everyone is crippled in some area, and everyone is somewhere on the path of evolution, some ahead of us and some behind. In the steps we have walked are the old lessons of life, and before us are our new teachings.
So all of us are evolving, whether we like it or not, right? We never devolve. We always evolve because we are constantly learning something or the other. We may stagnate, but we'll never devolve, right? All of us have some weaknesses. All of us have some strengths. We need to build on our strengths and cover our weaknesses and transcend our weaknesses, right? So that's the game that we are playing over here. And when we use the system, it can really be helpful for us to discern what should we read, what should we listen to, what should we eat, what should we do. It can become a very, very beautiful guide for us to actually help us in the path of evolving ourselves or growing ourselves.
There is nothing to feel guilty about and nothing to blame. There is no one to hate, but there is that which is better avoided. And such blind alleys will become increasingly apparent. Everyone has chosen his own level of consciousness, yet nobody could have done otherwise at any given point in time. We can only get there from here. Every leap has to have a platform from which to originate. Pain exists to promote evolution. Its cumulative effect finally forces us in a new direction, though the mechanism may be very slow.
Okay, so all of us have chosen a level of consciousness in which we are going to be operating, right? So we come here, when we come down from wherever we've come from, we've already chosen our path. We have chosen what we are going to experience. We've chosen the level of consciousness that we are going to be operating at. But because we forget that, we can devolve, we can start operating at a lower level of consciousness. So this is a very nice way of actually understanding what is our basic level of consciousness, and again, whom we should associate with. We can only get where we are going if we know where we are, right? So it's very important to understand where we are, and this system can actually tell you where you are, because what is the level of consciousness that you're operating at becomes very, very clear with this thing. Okay, so it's a beautiful way to actually assess yourself. Where are you operating from?
How many times is it necessary to hit bottom before a lesson is which may account for the sheer quantity of human suffering, so vast as to be incomprehensible. Slowly by inches does civilization advance.
So again, whenever we come to a roadblock, whenever we have pain, the universe is attempting to teach us a lesson. The moment we transcend the lesson, we learn the lesson, we transcend the pain, we transcend the situation. So again, it's a growth one step at a time. Okay, you can't, it's evolution is always a step-by-step process. It's not a jump. You cannot have a leap so easily.
It is an interesting exercise to use our technique to reassess our society's scapegoats, for example, to calibrate the current power level of the United Nations and then ask what level would be required to successfully do the job for which it was designed.
So again, what is the level of consciousness at which we are operating, and what is the level of consciousness needed for that thing to manifest? Now, this they're talking about United Nations. It could be anything, right? You want to cook a dish, for example. I'm just taking a very silly example. Now, to cook the dish, you need to be at a level of consciousness of 300, but you are operating at 200, right? So now it will be difficult for you to manifest the dish. And even if you do it, it will not come out properly. So you need to raise your level of consciousness to 300 so that the dish can manifest. Now, this you can do for literally anything. Anything that is not happening in your life that you want to happen, if you calibrate what is the uh, consciousness level at which it will manifest, and then figure out where you are operating from. If it is not manifesting, it's a given that you are operating at a lower level of consciousness than what is required for it to manifest. So you need to do things, you need to put strategies in place, processes in place, which will raise your level of consciousness to the level of consciousness at which that event will manifest or that situation will resolve. Or if you're wanting to acquire something, at which state you will be able to acquire something. This is a very powerful way of actually understanding this.
When we see such discrepancies spelled out in plain numbers, we may stop berating individuals and institutions, realizing they often simply do not have the requisite power to accomplish their task. Condemnation disappears with understanding, as does guilt. All judgment reveals itself to be self-judgment in the end. And when this is understood, a larger comprehension of the nature of life takes its place.
So if, let us say, you are giving someone a job to do in your organization, right? Now, the level of consciousness required to execute that job is at 400, but the guy is operating at 200. He will never be able to accomplish that job. Now, if you start blaming him that you didn't do what you had to do, then we are ourselves, I mean, we are the idiot. Let's put it that way. Because when we know that this guy can't accomplish the job and we are giving him the job, so then who's the idiot? We are the idiot. So if we can start understanding this, then we will start putting the square pegs in the square holes and the round pegs in the round holes, rather than square pegs in round holes and round pegs in square holes. So that again, we can be in equanimity. We don't lose it. We don't start judging people and we stop playing the blame game.
That which is injurious loses its capacity to harm when it is brought into the light. And now nothing need remain hidden. Every thought, action, decision, or feeling creates an eddy in the interlocking, interbalancing, ever moving energy fields of life, leaving a permanent record for all of time. This realization can be intimidating when it first dawns on us, but it becomes a springboard for rapid evolution.
So again, nothing is ever hidden, right? So anything that has happened, you can calibrate for. So now if you've not succeeded in your life in doing something, you can actually calibrate what level of consciousness were you at when you were doing that thing. And what was the state of consciousness required for you to achieve that? Now, going forward, once you come to that understanding, then you will always look and feel what is the state of consciousness you need to be at for doing something before doing it. So then again, you create a situation which will allow you to succeed rather than setting yourself up for failure. And let me tell you, everything is interrelated and interconnected. So you can really understand what are the mechanics, how does it work using this process. Yes, Renuji?
Bhaiya, that means some instant that's happened also. Supposing we wanted something to manifest and it didn't manifest, we can today check up as to why it didn't manifest, at what level were we when we were trying to manifest it, and what level we should be about an instant that's happened and gone.
Correct. Why not? Because the imprint, the energy imprint is still there, whether you like it or not.
Okay, so it becomes even a learning process for later on.
100%. 100%. That's exactly what we are saying here, right? That
Okay,
today, once we can understand what is the level of consciousness required to achieve something, right? Now, if we are not operating at that level, it is not going to manifest.
Yeah, I got
how
that.
much ever we may attempt to do it, how much ever we may judge people or blame others or blame the situation or blame some equipment or blame whatever, but we are not operating at that level of consciousness, so it's not going to manifest.
Yeah, so even something that's happened, you can check up.
So
like
you can learn from that experience.
Yeah,
right?
you can learn.
You can learn from that experience. Now you can also test. Now see, in awareness, we have a huge toolbox, right? So now, for example, something you want to make happen, right? Let us say there is some event or something that you wanted to manifest and it did not manifest, right? So now you connect that at what level of consciousness would that have manifested? And what was the level of consciousness at which you were operating?
Okay.
Right. Now you say that suppose I had shifted my state of consciousness at that point in time to focus 10. Then what would have been my level of consciousness?
That also you can check up.
You can check that also. So now what happens is that suppose to manifest that event, it would have been operating at, let's say, 300. Now you were operating at 200.
Right.
That is what you've tested. Now you test that, okay, if I would have gone into a state of F10 at that point of time, what would be my state of consciousness? Now, if it became 310, then if you operated at that time in F10, you could have manifested that event.
So even now, supposing there's something you want to manifest, you can even check that if I'm in F10, what level do I need to be?
Correct.
Supposing I'm below 200 at the moment and I need to be at 300 above, I can check that for the future also and for the past.
Absolutely.
Past for learning and future for
actual progress and actual growth.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Bhaiya. Thank you.
In this interconnected universe, every improvement we make in our private world improves the world at large for everyone. We all float on the collective level of consciousness of mankind, so that any increment we add comes back to us. We all add to our common buoyancy by our efforts to benefit life. What we do to benefit life automatically benefits all of us, because we are all included in that which is life. We are life. It is a scientific fact that what is good for you is good for me.
So, what does it say here? That today, whatever good we do affects the whole world. So again, If a butterfly flutters its wings in Brazil, the entire universe gets affected. So see, we cannot change anyone else. We cannot make anyone else do anything. But what we can do is to maintain our center, maintain our equanimity, maintain our level of conscious awareness. The more aware we become, the more aware we make the entire universe. And what can we work on is only ourselves. And when can we work in that? In the present, right? So the basic point is to be present, to be centered, to be able to hold space for ourselves and to hold space for people around us. That is what we can do to make a contribution. And once we do that, the whole world is also getting affected by our contribution. And then that contribution comes back to us because we are shifting the level of the consciousness of the whole world. As we read before, that most of the people in the world are operating below 200. There are not a small percentage of people are operating above 200, right? And that small percentage is actually carrying the rest of humanity. If that percentage was not there, then we would be down in the dumps, right? So again, it becomes very important for us. What is our contribution is to raise our level of consciousness. The rest will take care of itself.
Simple kindness to oneself and all that lives is the most powerful transformational force of all. It produces no backlash, has no downside, and never leads to loss or despair.
So now this is a very important statement here. Simple kindness to one's self, right? We are our own biggest critic. We crib and blame ourselves the most. We criticize ourselves the most. We crib about ourselves the most. I don't like this about myself. I don't do this. I'm not this. I'm not that. We are constantly cribbing about ourselves rather than accepting whatever we are with grace. Yes, accept what you are and then aspire for what you want to be, right? But if you're constantly criticizing and cribbing about yourself, I am fat, I am thin, I'm this, I'm that, then you're creating a huge problem for yourself. If you're kind to yourself, then there is no backlash, right? There is nothing. But I'm not saying that, be complacent about yourself. Always attempt to raise the bar, always attempt to evolve, always attempt to do better, but then do it with kindness, with gentleness, with compassion, rather than cribbing and beating yourself down all the time.
It increases one's own true power without exacting any toll. But to reach maximum power, such kindness can permit no exceptions, nor can it be practiced with expectation of some selfish reward. And its effect is as far reaching as it is subtle.
So now, there can be no exception to this kindness. So you have to maintain that state of equanimity, that state of compassion all the time, right? Also, if there is selfishness involved, if the ego gets involved, if the small guy gets involved, you circumvent it, right? So always this or better, win-win. So this is our mantra, right? When we're using the reball, when we are doing anything, we are doing any kind of healing, it's always this or better or a win-win scenario manifesting. So we need to get selfishness out of the picture. We need to always look for the greater good. What is good for the greater, for everyone's growth? That is what we need to focus on. Okay. And then it can start having far-reaching effects.
In a universe where like goes to like and birds of a feather fly together, we attract to us that which we emanate.
So again, this is a principle of resonance. Whatever you are resonating with, that is what is going to manifest in your life. That is what you're going to attract to yourself.
Consequences may come in an unsuspected way. We are kind to the elevator man, and a year later, a helpful stranger gives us a hand on a deserted highway. An observable this does not cause an observable that. Instead,
So again, if we do something good, right, and we have an expectation of getting something back, it's an issue. Number one. Number two, if we do something good and we expect something back from the same person, again, it does not happen because the universe works in mysterious ways. You do something, it will pay back to you somewhere else. So the idea here is to be constantly in an uplifting state of consciousness, constantly doing stuff, constantly being in situations, constantly thinking, reading, whatever you're doing in an uplifting state of consciousness, so that we are constantly focused on evolving our state of consciousness rather than anything else. And what the universe has to give back to you to support you will automatically come back to you. You do not have to hanker about it. This is also in the movie that we saw, pay it forward. So we have that fund. We still have that fund. About 8 or 9 people have actually used that fund to attend programs. Contributions to that fund are always welcome, right? So some people can't afford to attend programs. We are using that fund to allow them to start attending the programs. So Pay It Forward was a movie where this young boy did something nice for one person, and this person wanted to give something back, but he left a slip: pay it forward, do something good for someone else. And it actually became a big movement. So do something good for someone else because someone else had done something good for you. Okay, there's this story going around, and it always brings a tear to my eye, where this young boy is moving around and he has only 1 cent or something left, and he wants to have a meal. So he knocks on a door and he asks for a glass of milk or whatever with that coin. Now this lady, she see for some food. So the lady actually gives him a huge glass of milk, right? And he drinks that milk and he's satisfied. Now, years later, what happens is that this young boy has actually become a doctor, and this lady is in the hospital. And someone refers that lady to him as the doctor, and he sees the name and he recognizes the name, right? So he does the treatment and everything. Now the lady is worried that she's going to lose all her savings for the hospital bill. And the doctor says that before the bill is presented, to give the bill to him, and he writes on the bill, paid with 1 glass of milk, right? So again, whatever you give out will always come back to you in some form or the other. It's very important, that state of consciousness that you're operating at. What are you doing? Where are you coming from? Becomes so important in universal consciousness that it's not funny, right? And we must all be aware of it. How are we talking to those who are below us? How are we referring to them? How do we communicate when no one is watching, right? Becomes very important because you are watching yourself. How do you talk to your staff? How do you talk to a person who's a stranger? Do you reach out to help someone when someone needs a little bit of support? Or are you just taking a video, right? Nowadays, people, when someone is in trouble, they'll start taking a picture, right? So you rather go and help that person rather than take a picture. So these things start becoming very important when we want to raise our level of consciousness.
instead, in reality, a shift in motive or behavior acts on a field which then produces an increased likelihood of responding in a positive way. Our inner world, but one from which we cannot draw at will. The disposition of the funds is determined by a subtle energy field, which awaits a trigger to release this power back into our own lives.
So a shift in motivation, a shift in perspective is very, very important. And over here, Shimangla blanked out a little bit. Our inner working is like building a bank account, but one that we cannot draw from at will. We create a bank account. Whenever we are doing something good, we are raising our level of consciousness, we are creating a fund, we are creating a bank balance. but it is something that the universe will decide when it will give it back to us, right? So that is where that trust comes in. And this is what the karmic principle is also. Now, if I'm not, so my definition of karma has also taken a turn in the last few years, where if you do not attach any emotion to the action, then karma doesn't get created, right? You're not going to experience an opposite reaction. So that becomes pure bank balance, because you've just done it for the sake of doing it. That's it. And then you've forgotten. Now it depends on the universe, what the universe wants to do with it. But if you are expecting something back, then you're creating karma. If you attach emotion to it, you're creating karma. Okay, so this becomes very important, that bank balance is what actually raises your level of consciousness.
Yeah, you
Yes.
will always attach something to it, na?
What?
Won't you, when you do something,
Hmm.
it's not wanting something back, but there is some attachment to it. No, you all of a
Naturally.
sudden feel like doing something. So
Yeah.
you said you should not be attached to any.
No. So one second. What am I saying over here, right? If you have an emotional attachment to an action, it creates karma. If there is no emotional attachment to the action, then there is no karma.
Okay.
You understand? Now,
Right.
for example, we are doing the book reading. I really enjoy doing the book reading, right?
Yeah.
But for some reason, if it stops happening, if I start getting upset about it, for example, right, then there is an emotional attachment to it. But if I can drop it without getting any emotional attachment, then there is no emotional attachment to it. So the idea is not to be attached, not to have any emotional attachment to any action that you are taking. Basically, that's the game that we want to play. I'm not there yet. I'm also emotionally attached to a lot of stuff, but we are getting there. Slowly and steadily, we are getting there. Yes, Raju Mama?
Somebody said, किसी ने बोला, मतलब not my version, जो हम करते हैं, क्रिया करते हैं, because of prarabdha.
Because of
the prarabdha that
Correct.
we do some kriya.
Correct.
But when we attach ourselves, तो वो कर्म हो जाता है.
Correct.
क्रिया से जब आप अपने आप को बांध लेते हैं, तो कर्म हो जाता है. मतलब ऐसे डिस्कशन हो रहा था, तो मैंने पूछा कि ये जो हम कर्म करते रहते हैं, तो फिर उसके तो फल भोगने, मतलब कुछ भी करते हैं, अच्छा बुरा हो और फल भोगना हो, तो आपकी मुक्ति कैसे होगी?
तो आपको यही तो बोला ना.
तो उन्होंने बोला कि हाँ, तो उन्होंने यही, मतलब जब आपको लगता है कि आप करते, भले अच्छा हो या बुरा हो, अच्छी या बुरी, व्हाटएवर, अगर आपने अपने आप को अटैच कर लिया कि मैंने किया, तो मैं करना पड़ेगा.
Correct. So ownership, if you take, that means you're attaching emotion to it. That's exactly what I'm saying.
तो उनका ये कहना था कि कर्म बंधन आपके नहीं बनते हैं in that case.
Absolutely. If you don't have any attachment to the action, if there's no emotional attachment to the action, then it doesn't become karma. So it's just an action. That's it. ठीक है? आप ब्रेकअप कर रहे थे, इसलिए ठीक से पता सुना ही नहीं दे रहा.
No, but then Niket ji, is this not a contradiction to this thing when we say कि हम पूजा करते हैं तो like हमको पूरे भाव से करना चाहिए and all that? Then
नहीं.
तो as
पूजा करते हैं भाव से करना चाहिए, with compassion, with love. If I'm doing puja in an aspiration that I will get this, then you've attached emotion to it.
अच्छा.
You're doing an action for the sake of the action. You're not doing the action for the sake of a payback.
Okay.
If you are expecting a payback, then there is attachment to it, no?
Okay, so it's like raising the level of consciousness and doing it with a high level.
Correct. If you're doing it out of love, let us say a mother is doing something for the child. Is the mother going to expect something back immediately from the child? आज एक बेबी है, 2 साल का, 1 साल का बेबी है, मदर क्या भाव से कर रही है उसके लिए?
Right.
She's doing it in a higher state of consciousness. She has no attachment. She's doing it because of love.
Right.
Right. Now a mother does it that वो बड़ा होके मेरे को look after करेगा.
Oh, then it's gone.
Now there's a problem, na?
Right.
You get that?
Yeah. Yes.
निखिल जी एक बात और है इसमें,
आप ब्रेकअप कर रहे हैं मामा जी.
प्रोबेबली मेरा नेटवर्क कुछ गड़बड़ है.
बोलिए.
कैन यू हियर मी क्लियरली नाउ?
We can hear you.
मतलब वही डिस्कशन में आगे मेरी जब बात करी ना कि हम पूजा कर रहे हैं, तो
बोलिए.
हम पूजा नहीं एक्सपेक्टेशन से नहीं, हम इसी इच्छा से कर रहे हैं कि ये मैं नहीं कर रहा हूं, ये वो करवा रहे हैं इसलिए मैं कर रहा हूं.
Possible. But again, you have to see what level of consciousness you have to figure out. See, I'll tell you, very simple, right? What is the state of consciousness with which you are doing something? Whether it is puja, whether it is eating food, whether it is having a bath, whether it is reading a book, whether it is working in a machinery, whether it is driving a car, what is the state of consciousness with which you are doing something? Basically, that's the game, nothing more than that. In simplistic terms. Okay.
Yeah. Then it ourselves with the action. Then there's
Correct. So you assess where you are. The same action can be from a level of consciousness of 75, greed, and it can be from a level of consciousness of 500. The action is the same, but what is your state of consciousness when you're doing it? What is your perspective of doing it will shift the entire game. That is what it said in the previous paragraph, right? A shift in the motive of behavior acts on the field that then produces an increasing likelihood of a response in a positive way. What is your state of consciousness? What is your perspective about doing it will shift the entire result of the action, whatever you are taking. Have you got that?
नहीं, मोटिव नहीं भी हो तो भी
अरे मोटिव तो है ही है सर. आपका मोटिव है कि मेरे को उसका डायरेक्शन फॉलो करना है, वो मेरे से करवा रहा है, तो मोटिव तो हो ही गया ना. चलिए, दिस इज अ टॉपिक ऑफ लॉन्ग डिस्कशन and you're breaking up, so
yeah,
it becomes difficult.
It is.
Yeah, you're breaking up, so it becomes difficult.
Yeah, I know. मेरे इसमें नेटवर्क में कुछ प्रॉब्लम है, some issue.
चलिए.
Dickens' A Christmas Carol is the story of all our lives. We all are Scrooge. We are all Tiny Tim. All of us are both selfish and lame in some areas. We are all victims like Bob Cratchit, and we are all as indignantly moralistic as Mrs. Cratchit, refusing to toast Scrooge. The ghost of Christmas past haunts all of our lives. The spirit of Christmases to come beckons us all to make the choices that will enhance both our own existence and that of others. If we calibrate the energy level of Christmas by the way it becomes obvious, that power resides within the human heart itself.
So see, all of us have all these characters. In some cases, we are selfish. In some cases, we are conjuice. In some cases, we are mean. In some cases, we are compassionate. In some cases, we are loving. So all of us have all these perspectives within us. The basic point is that we need to start becoming aware and start raising our level of consciousness, right? The more we become, we start operating above 500, the better off we will ultimately be, because Above 500 is where we operate from the heart. So we shift from total logic operating, which is where the ego operates from, we come down to the compassion, to heartfulness.
All avenues of questioning lead to the same ultimate answer, the discovery that nothing is hidden and truth stands everywhere. Revealed is the key to enlightenment about the simplest practical affairs and the destiny of mankind. In the process, we can find that all our fears have been based on falsehood. The displacement of the false by the true is the essence of the healing of all things visible and invisible.
So very clearly, right? Everything is available. Everything is actually perceivable. Nothing is hidden. We think that we can hide stuff, but again, I'm repeating, we can never hide anything. For when a perceiver has the ability to perceive, you cannot hide anything from anyone. And basically, every time that you are fearful, right, there is something false. So if you think you're doing something right, you will do it in the open. If you think you're doing something wrong, you will do it behind closed bars. So understand from where you are operating. The moment you start understanding that anything that makes you go behind closed doors is an issue. It is very simple. Anything that you do in open is all right, right? Again, it is a matter of perspective. So you have to understand from what state of consciousness and what perspective that you are actually coming from.
And always a final question will eventually arise for every questioner. The biggest question of all, who am I?
So ultimately, we are in a constant search for ourselves. What am I? Who am I? What is my actual identity? Right? We are not the body. We are not the mind. We are not the intellect. Then what are we? So how do we come to that? So that is the basic game that we need to play to evolve our state of conscious awareness, to come into that oneness, to come into that equanimetical state where we become our true selves. That is the game that we are all playing over here. I think we can stop here.